There's no place like home opening statement. The Wizard of Oz wasn't just a dazzling Technicolor fantasy. It was a battlefield of pain, chaos, and sacrifice hidden behind Hollywood's golden curtain. The audience saw magic. But behind the camera, stars endured toxic makeup, near-fatal stunts, bitter conflicts, and a studio system that pushed human endurance to its limits. Today, we're pulling back that curtain. Here are 20 weird, shocking, and dark secrets from The Wizard of Oz, including one bonus fact that may just change the way you see this classic forever. Stay tuned, because you won't believe how deep this rabbit hole goes. Judy Garland's dangerous diet. Judy Garland was just 16 years old when she was cast as Dorothy, but MGM executives decided she looked too plump for the role. Their solution? A brutal regimen. She was forced onto a starvation diet of chicken soup, coffee, and cigarettes. Studio handlers even gave her amphetamines to suppress her appetite, followed by barbiturates to sleep at night. This chemical cycle wrecked her health, sparking an addiction that haunted her for life. Garland herself later admitted, "They'd give us pep pills, then knock us out with sleeping pills." What audiences saw was a fresh-faced farm girl. What they didn't know was that Dorothy was played by a teenager, trapped in a dangerous cycle of studio control. The yellow brick road was paved with exploitation. Tin Man's makeup nearly killed an actor. The first actor to play the Tin Man, Buddy Ebsen, endured a nightmare. His shimmering silver makeup was made with aluminum powder, a toxic substance that clogged his lungs. Within days of filming, Ebsen collapsed, struggling to breathe. He was hospitalized in critical condition and forced to drop out of the film. MGM didn't publicize the accident. They simply recast the role with Jack Haley and reformulated the makeup into an aluminum paste. Haley still suffered eye infections from it. The audience saw a charming, hollow man searching for a heart. The reality? A role so toxic, it sent one actor to the hospital and scarred another. Behind the glittering fantasy lay industrial poisons disguised as art, the scorching heat of Technicolor lights. Technicolor was still cutting edge in 1939, and it required brutal lighting. The cameras demanded so much illumination that temperatures on set regularly soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Actors in heavy costumes, especially Burt Lahr in the lion's 90-pound fur suit, sweated profusely and fainted during takes. The Cowardly Lion's costume, made of real lion pelts, reeked from the constant moisture. The smell was reportedly so bad, crew members gagged whenever he walked past. Viewers saw dazzling colors and whimsical sets. What they didn't know was that the actors were baking under blistering lights, gasping for air in suffocating costumes. The Emerald City shimmered on screen, but behind the lens, it was a sweat-soaked furnace. Margaret Hamilton's fiery accident. Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch of the West, suffered one of the film's most terrifying on-set accidents. During a scene where she disappears in a burst of smoke and flame, the trapdoor malfunctioned. Hamilton was engulfed by the fire, suffering severe burns to her face and hands. She was hospitalized for weeks, her skin literally peeling from the damage. MGM executives were more worried about production delays than her pain. When she returned, she refused to do any more fire stunts, declaring, "I'll do anything, but I won't risk my life again." What audiences saw was a cackling green witch dissolving in smoke. What they didn't see was the real horror of an actress scarred by Hollywood's obsession with spectacle. The toxic green makeup. Hamilton's ordeal didn't end with fire. The green paint used for her Wicked Witch makeup contained copper-based chemicals so dangerous they couldn't be ingested. She had to eat using a straw to avoid swallowing it. Removing the paint required alcohol-based solvents that burned her skin. Even her stunt double suffered. When performing a broomstick explosion, she was badly injured and spent weeks in the hospital. For the Wicked Witch, the role wasn't fantasy, it was torment. Viewers saw an unforgettable villain in shimmering emerald hues. What they didn't know was that the color of evil was crafted from toxins that clung to the skin like poison, turning every meal, every breath, into a hazard. Flying monkeys' dangerous wires. The flying monkeys terrified generations of children, but the actors inside those costumes endured a different horror. Each performer was strapped to piano wires rigged to hoist them across the stage. The wires frequently snapped, sending stuntmen crashing to the hard studio floor. At least one broke ribs, while others suffered concussions. The wings and costumes, already heavy, made falls even more brutal. MGM considered accidents just part of the production process. No safety nets, no modern stunt protocols, just grit. On screen, the monkeys appeared like nightmare creatures soaring across the sky. Behind the curtain, they were exhausted acrobats risking their lives on every take. The fantasy of flight was really an experiment in pain, leaving bruises, scars, and fear long after the cameras stopped rolling. The lion's costume of real fur. Burt Lahr's cowardly lion costume wasn't just heavy, it was grotesque. MGM wanted authenticity, so they used actual lion pelts, making the suit weigh close to 90 pounds. Under the scorching Technicolor lights, it became unbearable. Lahr would sweat through the fur until it was soaked and matted, giving off a stench that filled the soundstage. The costume could not be cleaned daily, so it reeked worse as filming dragged on. Crew members joked they could track the lion by smell alone. Lahr himself nearly collapsed from exhaustion multiple times. Viewers saw a whimsical lion searching for courage. In reality, the actor inside was suffocating under dead animal skins, dragging his body through scene after scene in what amounted to a wearable torture device disguised as children's entertainment. Judy Garland's slap heard around the set. Tension ran high between director Victor Fleming and Judy Garland. During the scene where Dorothy slaps the cowardly lion, Garland couldn't stop giggling. After several failed takes, Fleming snapped. He pulled Garland aside and shockingly slapped her across the face. Garland, stunned and humiliated, delivered the next take perfectly, tears in her eyes trembling with emotion. The studio system treated young actors as property, and Garland's mistreatment became emblematic of that control. She later admitted how often she was disciplined into performances. The audience adored her innocence. What they didn't know was that behind that charm was a girl enduring cruelty, fear, and pressure from adults who demanded perfection at any cost. The slap that brought authenticity to the screen left invisible scars that never healed. Munchkin mayhem. The Munchkin actors, many recruited from Europe, became infamous for their offset behavior. With little supervision, they reportedly engaged in wild antics, heavy drinking, brawling, and harassing female cast and crew. Judy Garland herself joked in interviews that they got drunk every night and had to be picked up with butterfly nets. Though stories were exaggerated by press hungry for scandal, the truth was chaotic enough. Some Munchkin performers felt exploited and underpaid, forced into grueling schedules while treated as novelties rather than actors. On screen, they created the enchanting world of Munchkinland. Off-screen, tensions and debauchery spiraled into tabloid fodder, cementing a legend of misbehavior that overshadowed their artistry. Hollywood painted them as comic relief, but behind the smiles were individuals battling stereotypes, isolation, and indignities. The snow was made of asbestos. One of the film's most magical moments, Dorothy and her friends drifting to sleep in a field of snow, hid one of its darkest secrets. The snow falling gently on their faces was made of pure asbestos. At the time, asbestos was widely used in film productions for its fireproof and fluffy qualities. No one realized it was a carcinogen. Garland, Bolger, Haley, and Lahr breathed it in as it blanketed their costumes and hair. Crew members brushed it into piles between takes. Decades later, asbestos exposure would be linked to fatal diseases like mesothelioma, audiences saw a scene of pure enchantment. What they didn't see was actors literally choking on poison disguised as snow. The scene remains iconic, but its beauty is permanently shadowed by its toxic reality. And before we move on, go ahead and like and subscribe because these secrets only get darker from here. What you're about to hear makes even asbestos snow seem tame. The brutal working hours. The cast of The Wizard of Oz didn't just act, they endured marathon shifts under the harshest conditions. Judy Garland, only 16, worked 6 days a week for up to 16 hours a day. Overtime was common and breaks were rare. Makeup sessions alone took hours. The Scarecrow's prosthetics had to be glued and peeled off daily, leaving actor Ray Bolger's skin raw and bleeding. Garland later revealed that MGM handlers even taped down her breasts to keep her looking childlike, a humiliating and painful process. The cheerful musical numbers concealed a darker truth. The studio's relentless grind pushed its young star and supporting cast to physical and emotional exhaustion. For every joyful skip down the yellow brick road, there were sleepless nights, aching bodies, and whispered cries for relief. The Scarecrow's face left scars. Ray Bolger's Scarecrow costume looked whimsical, but it scarred him, literally. His burlap mask and prosthetics were glued directly to his skin with spirit gum. After hours under scorching lights, the adhesive bonded painfully, and removing it ripped layers of flesh. By the end of filming, Bolger bore permanent lines etched into his face, faint but real reminders of the role. His friends joked that he never really took the mask off. The Scarecrow's wobbly movements and wide-eyed expressions became iconic, but they were born partly from discomfort. Bolger himself admitted that he feared the role had physically altered him forever. Audiences saw an actor embodying nervous energy. What they didn't know was that each smile carried the sting of scars Hollywood demanded he hide. The first Dorothy was fired. Judy Garland wasn't MGM's first choice for Dorothy. Originally, studio heads cast Shirley Temple, hoping her box office draw would elevate the film. But Temple's singing range wasn't strong enough for Over the Rainbow, and the plan fell apart. Then MGM tried an older actress, but executives worried she looked too mature. Enter Garland. Even then, she wasn't considered ideal. MGM slimmed her down, bound her figure, and styled her hair to look younger. Ironically, the studio that doubted her would forever link Garland's image with Dorothy Gale. The movie made her a star, but at the cost of her innocence. Audiences saw destiny in Garland's casting. What they didn't see was the chaos of revolving doors, discarded choices, and executives gambling with a teenager's life. The Wicked Witch was almost cut. MGM worried that Margaret Hamilton's Wicked Witch might be too frightening for children. Early test screenings showed kids screaming and hiding under their seats whenever she appeared. Studio executives considered cutting her role down dramatically, fearing backlash. Hamilton herself admitted she toned down her performance, afraid she might terrify audiences. In fact, several of her scenes, including a chilling sequence where she tortures Dorothy, were cut entirely. Ironically, the witch became the film's most iconic character, embodying fear, power, and theatrical menace. The audience embraced her as one of cinema's greatest villains. What they didn't know was how close MGM came to watering her down into a minor nuisance. Instead, Hamilton's intensity burned itself into pop culture forever, scars and all, despite studio panic. Toto earned more than the Munchkins. The beloved dog Toto, played by a Cairn Terrier named Terry, earned a weekly salary of $125, a princely sum in 1939. By comparison, the Munchkin actors received just $50 to $100 a week, despite long hours and grueling conditions. Toto even had her own trainer, handler, and studio accommodations, while many of the little people in the cast were lodged in modest hotels with little support. To add insult to injury, Terry was accidentally injured when a crew member stepped on her paw, but the studio halted filming until she recovered. No such care was given to the Munchkin performers when they were hurt. The contrast was striking. The film's tiniest stars were treated as expendable, while a small dog received celebrity treatment. Hollywood priorities were brutally clear. Judy Garland was drugged on set. To keep Judy Garland's energy high and her weight down, MGM doctors handed her pills daily. In the morning, she was given amphetamines to stay awake and lively. At night, barbiturates were forced on her to sleep. This vicious cycle left her physically dependent and emotionally unstable, even during filming. Garland later admitted she was trapped in a haze, often disoriented on set. The irony was cruel. Dorothy's innocence became the defining image of youth in cinema, while the actress behind her was chemically restrained by a system that valued profit over health. Audiences fell in love with a wide-eyed Kansas girl. What they didn't see was a teenager shaking under the weight of addiction, deliberately engineered by the very studio selling her image of purity. The makeup couldn't be removed. The actor's makeup wasn't just heavy, it clung like armor. The Scarecrow's latex pieces had to be peeled off with harsh solvents that damaged skin. Jack Haley's Tin Man paste seeped into his pores, causing rashes and chronic eye irritation. Margaret Hamilton's green copper-based paint left stains on her skin for weeks. Even Burt Lahr's lion suit glued fur to his face with adhesives that pulled his skin raw. Actors would leave set each day still half in character, unable to fully wash it away. The transformation into Oz's beloved figures was never temporary. It scarred their bodies long after the cameras cut. The audience saw magic. The actors lived with burns, blisters, and lingering chemical traces. Hollywood literally etched Oz into their flesh. The brutality of the whip scene. One of the Wicked Witch's deleted scenes revealed just how extreme the tone once was. In it, Hamilton's witch used a whip on Dorothy and her companions. Early screenings horrified viewers, particularly parents, who demanded MGM cut the footage. Executives agreed, fearing it would destroy the movie's reputation. Still, traces of the darker intent remained. Hamilton's threatening demeanor and menacing dialogue hinted at cruelty lurking beneath the fairy tale. The scene's removal shows how close The Wizard of Oz came to being less a children's fantasy and more a nightmare. What audiences didn't know was that behind the glittering songs and vibrant landscapes lay a harsher, more disturbing vision of Oz, one the studio feared to unleash, but which scarred those who filmed it. 2 directors quit before Victor Fleming. The chaos behind the camera matched the drama in front of it. Before Victor Fleming took over, 2 directors had already abandoned ship. Richard Thorpe was fired after just 2 weeks for a lackluster vision. His Dorothy wore a blonde wig and heavy makeup, which test audiences despised. Then George Cukor briefly stepped in, overhauling Garland's look into the natural style we know today, before leaving for Gone with the Wind. By the time Fleming arrived, the production was already in turmoil, with confused actors and wasted footage. The result? A film with multiple artistic fingerprints layered across its reels. Audiences thought they saw a single, unified masterpiece. In truth, they watched a stitched-together fantasy born from fractured leadership and studio desperation, the Wizard's secret struggle. Frank Morgan, who played the Wizard, was a Hollywood veteran, but even he wasn't spared from Oz's dark realities. His many costumes, including the Wizard's iconic coat, came from MGM's wardrobe department. Incredibly, one coat was later discovered to have belonged to L. Frank Baum, the author of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. A wild coincidence or a studio publicity stunt? Regardless, Morgan often drank heavily on set, and his erratic behavior frustrated directors. His performance, whimsical yet melancholic, was shaped by personal demons bubbling just beneath the surface. The man behind the curtain was battling his own fragility. Viewers saw him as a fraud redeemed by kindness. Off-screen, Morgan embodied that duality, an actor hiding weakness under bravado, a wizard whose magic barely concealed the human cost. Bonus fact, the suicide myth. One of the most enduring and disturbing legends of The Wizard of Oz claims that a Munchkin actor hanged himself on set, and his body can be seen swinging in the background of a forest scene. For decades, VHS copies fueled the rumor, with blurry footage sparking late-night debates. But the truth is stranger than fiction. The hanging figure was actually a large bird rented from the Los Angeles Zoo to create a whimsical backdrop. When the footage was remastered for DVD, the bird's form became clear. Still, the myth persists, a testament to how unsettling the film's dark production legacy remains. Audiences wanted to believe the fantasy of Oz hid something sinister, and in a way, they were right, just not in the way the legend suggests. Closing reflection. The Wizard of Oz is remembered as Hollywood's shimmering jewel, a technicolor triumph of song and wonder. But behind its magic lay burns, scars, exhaustion, and abuse that haunted its cast forever. The price of fantasy was often human suffering. Next time you hear Dorothy whisper, "There's no place like home," remember, for those who made the film, home was far away, a dream beyond the studio's iron grip. If you learned something shocking today, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, follow the yellow brick road, but never forget the shadows hiding just behind the curtain.